I think I have to kill my mom. I know this sounds crazy. Hell, maybe it is. I honestly don't know. All I know is that the woman who has been living in my house for the last 3 weeks is not my mother. My mom is a smoker. It's something I've always tried getting her to stop. She smells like cigarettes. Her voice is gravelly. She has premature wrinkles because this nasty little habit has belonged to her since she was in high school. I was almost happy when she came home from work all those days ago, smelling sweet, like candy almost. I thought that maybe she had finally taken my advice and hadn't lit a cancer stick, at least for the day. But I didn't really even have time to dwell on it because she was just so affectionate towards me when she waltzed through the door. She was humming and smiling to herself. 25 years of nicotine stains seemed to have completely vanished from that smile. She and I have a complicated relationship. She's my mom, and I know she loves me, but we never talk about that love. We're not big huggers. She was never the type of mom to censor herself because I was around. On this day, though, she looked surprisingly happy to see me. She pulled me in for a big, tight hug that lasted for longer than any hug before. I felt, I don't know, almost embracive. I didn't realize how much I needed it. After finally letting go, she breezed past me towards the kitchen, taking off her coat and plopping her purse down on the coffee table before announcing that she'd be cooking my favorite meal. She whipped up some of the best spaghetti I'd ever tasted, and the two of us sat at the table to enjoy it together. Well, I enjoyed it. She mostly just kind of watched me. She had her Christmas face on, that face moms usually have when they watch you open your gifts, waiting to see how excited they make you. She was just so quiet, though. The kitchen was borderline silent. All I could hear was the leaky faucet and the scraping of my fork against the plate. To counter the awkward silence, I decided to just throw out what I was thinking by asking her about her scent. Her face never changed. No look of pride, no guilt, just her warm smile. She didn't even answer my question right away. It was almost like she hadn't even heard it. Then, when she finally spoke, it had nothing to do with what I asked her. "Mommy quit her job today, sweetie," she grinned. "Now I get to spend all my time with you. Isn't that so happy?" I was so caught off guard by the statement that I didn't know how to answer. But hey, I mean, things happen, you know? Sometimes people have transformative days. Sometimes they make emotional decisions. At the very worst, I thought this was just me witnessing a fit of mania. After dinner, I decided to go to my room to play some video games. Mom stayed behind to wash some dishes, even though I offered to do them myself. A few hours went by. I started feeling a bit snackish, and when I returned to the kitchen, there she was, still standing over the sink, rubbing a washcloth mindlessly over a plate while she stared blankly out the window. The sink was still full of dirty dishes. I approached her slowly, just to see if she needed any help or if she was okay, and I think that snapped her out of her trance. She blinked hard before that smile came back. "Oh, sweetie," she cooed. "Mommy's okay. Why don't you put on your pajamas? Mommy will come tuck you in just a moment, okay?" I'm 17. My mom has never in her life tucked me in. The closest she's come is when she comes in to tell me goodnight from my doorway. I walked away, a bit uneasy, back to my bedroom. I didn't expect her to actually tuck me in, but I did expect her to at least say goodnight. An hour passed, then 2. I could still hear the sink running in the kitchen. I returned, and she was still there, still washing the same plate. It was spotless at this point. I guess she heard me coming, or at least felt my presence, because, on a dime, she stopped. No smile this time. Just one cold, empty question. "You ready for bed, sweetie?" She dropped the plate in the sink, causing it to break, but she paid it no mind. She just rigidly walked towards me, like an animatronic. She pushed me back towards my bedroom with more strength than she should have had and wrapped me up in my blanket. I couldn't even move. The sheets may have well been ropes. She kissed my forehead for longer than I would have liked, then flicked my light switch. Only, she didn't leave. She just stayed there in the doorway, watching me in the darkness. "Go to sleep, honey. Mommy's watching you. Don't worry. I'd never let anything happen to you." I asked her to leave, but she ignored me every time. Falling asleep was nearly impossible. I still don't know how I managed. I woke up and she was still there. She hadn't moved an inch. I had to go to school. I had a part-time job. I needed to leave, but she wouldn't let me. She was just acting so strange. "Mommy needs you, honey. You don't want to leave Mommy, do you? I get so sad when you're away." She wouldn't let me have a phone. She must have taken it while I was sleeping that first night, because I haven't seen it since. I doubt I still have a job, and I know for a fact I've missed enough school for my GPA to have fallen dramatically. She's just so strong now. I haven't seen her smoke one cigarette. She cooks spaghetti every single night. She tucks me in like a spider spinning a web around its prey. Then she just watches me. She follows me to the bathroom. She goes on these destructive rampages any time I try to leave. I thought she was sick, but now I know the truth. I should have known after the first time I woke up with bite marks on my legs and arms. I should have known the first time I caught her salivating over me while I slept. She wasn't just being weird. She wasn't herself at all. And I know that because today, her boss showed up at my door. He wasn't demanding an explanation. He wasn't furious that he lost a loyal employee. He was offering his condolences. He gave me flowers. He gave me a hug. He told me everything happens for a reason. Because apparently, my mom died at work 3 weeks ago. It was a freak accident involving some of the machinery she works with at the factory. The company was preparing a settlement for me this entire time, and I had zero clue. He told me I'd be hearing from an attorney soon, and that my mom had life insurance through the company. But none of that matters to me. Not the money, not the company, not even the accident. All that I care about is getting whoever this person is out of my mother's house. The man on the train knew things he shouldn't have known. This happened in the summer of 2000 when I was 17. I was staying with my grandmother in Voronezh for the summer, and one night she asked me to go to a small store and pick up a few things for breakfast. It was around 11 p.m. when I left the store. I had a plastic bag in one hand and my CD player in my pocket. I was listening to Nirvana and barely paying attention to anything around me. I was wearing a denim jacket my father had given me for New Year's. His brother, my uncle, had sent it to him from Philadelphia. I was pretty proud of that jacket back then. Having something from America felt like a big deal. The train was supposed to arrive in a few minutes. There was almost nobody on the platform. When the train finally arrived, I immediately noticed how old it was. The cars were dirty. Some of the windows were cloudy, and inside it smelled like dust, metal, and old upholstery. I got into the first car I saw. There were only a few people inside. The light above the door kept flickering. It never went completely out. It would just become dim for a second, and then come back. I sat by the window, put the bag next to me, and turned up the volume on my CD player. A few minutes later, the train started moving. I watched the occasional lights outside the window and thought about getting back to my grandmother's apartment. At the time, I had no idea that a few minutes later, a man would get on the train who I had seen before. I just couldn't remember where. At the next station, the train stopped, and a man in his mid-40s got on. He looked completely ordinary. Dark pants, a light, short-sleeved shirt, and a small plastic bag in his hand. Nothing strange about him. He walked through the car and sat across from me. I didn't pay much attention to him. I still had one earphone in, leaving the other ear free so I could hear announcements. The man looked out the window for a few seconds, then looked at me. "Nice jacket." I pulled out one earphone. "Thanks." He nodded. "American?" I looked down at the jacket. "Sort of. My uncle sent it from Philadelphia." The man didn't say anything. He just looked back out the window. I figured he'd probably seen something written on the label. The train started moving again. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. Then he asked, "Been in Voronezh long?" "No, I got here recently." "Staying with your grandmother?" I looked at him. "Yeah." He smiled slightly. "For a month?" I stopped smiling. "How do you know that?" He shrugged. "Just a guess." For some reason, I suddenly felt uncomfortable. I put my earphone back in and turned the music up. A few minutes later, the man asked, "Where's Mitya?" I froze. I slowly pulled the earphone out again. "Which Mitya?" He looked directly at me. "Your friend." I didn't answer. The train suddenly seemed incredibly quiet. Even the music in my ears sounded distant, despite the volume being exactly the same. The light above the door flickered again, once, twice. The third time, it almost went completely dark. I looked at the man. He was still sitting across from me. "How do you know Mitya?" He was silent for several seconds. Then he said, "You wanted to leave early that time, too." "What?" He turned back toward the window. "Nothing." I stared at him, trying to figure out what the hell he was talking about. And then I remembered the school, the abandoned school where Mitya and I had gone the previous summer. I remembered the basement, the people with the candles, the blood on the floor, the knife. I still thought about that night sometimes, even though I tried not to. I wanted to ask the man what he meant, but the train started slowing down. He stood up. "This is my stop." I looked out the window. There was a small station outside that I had never seen before. The man walked toward the doors. Before stepping out, he turned around. "Don't get off at the next one." "Why?" He looked at me like he wanted to say something. Instead, he simply stepped off. The doors closed. The train started moving again. I watched the station disappear behind us. Then I took my ticket out of my pocket and looked at the route. I read the station name several times. It wasn't on the route. I figured I must have simply forgotten about it. A few minutes later, the train started slowing down again. I looked out the window. It was the same station, but this time I noticed something else. There was an old metal sign with a street name on it. I recognized it. It was the street where that abandoned school had once stood. I immediately took out my earphone. The train stopped. The doors opened. There was nobody on the platform. Nobody at all. No people, no cars, no lights from any nearby houses. Just the old sign, the empty platform, and some bushes behind it. I didn't get off. The doors closed. A few seconds later, the train started moving again. I looked at my watch. Only 17 minutes had passed. The trip from the station where I had gotten on to my grandmother's place normally took almost an hour. I started getting nervous. When the train finally stopped at my station, I got off almost immediately. The street was quiet. I hurried home. When I entered the apartment, my grandmother was still awake. She was sitting in the kitchen watching TV. She looked at me. "Why are you back so late?" "The train was delayed." She frowned. "What train?" "What do you mean?" "You left 10 minutes ago." At first I didn't understand what she was saying. "What?" She looked at the clock. 11:17 p.m. I took out my CD player. It was still playing Nirvana. I pressed the stop button. The music stopped. That's when I noticed the batteries were completely dead. This story was shared by a woman. The following is her first-person account. My boyfriend has something he shouldn't have. Now I'm questioning our relationship. I thought I'd found the one. We clicked so naturally. We both shared an interest in photography, though his pictures were noticeably better than mine. Loved the same movies, both enjoyed walks in the park, and our political views were borderline identical. We met about a month ago. It was at this bar I love, and I'll admit, I was a little tipsy. Cute boy, a few drinks in my system. It was a recipe for regret. Only, I didn't regret it. Our conversations flowed so smoothly. His half-drunk compliments made me blush. Plus, drinks were on him. Unlike a lot of the guys you'd meet in a bar, he didn't try and force himself back to my apartment. I lived just a few blocks away from the bar, so he walked me home, laughing and wobbling more than he wanted to let on. When we got there, I braced myself. He was great, but I wasn't the kind of girl that would just let a complete stranger into my home after a night out at the bar. I found myself praying he wouldn't ask. By some miracle, he didn't. Instead, he asked gently, almost bashfully, for my number. I couldn't help but smile stupidly. Then he smiled stupidly back. I felt my heart do somersaults. I gave him my number, trying to withhold my excitement, and when I looked back up at him, I could see the desire in his eyes. Not sexual desire, though. It was like he saw his future in my eyes. His face started to turn red, and he started struggling to make eye contact, stumbling over his words in a way that didn't seem connected to the drinks. He asked if he could kiss me, and I couldn't have said yes fast enough. I wanted to kiss him on the lips, but instead, he leaned down and pressed those lips softly against my forehead. He pulled away slowly before speaking. "Your eyes are so beautiful." I felt fireworks in my tummy. I made him promise to text me when he got home, and he watched to make sure I made it inside before he started back towards the bar. I spent the rest of that night kicking my feet like a little schoolgirl. I had never experienced something like this feeling before. My past boyfriends had been such assholes. This guy seemed to care about me rather than just sex. He followed through on his promise, and texting led to a phone call before we fell asleep on the phone together. We saw each other a lot in the weeks that followed, mostly on the weekends, but sometimes he'd come visit me at work. Those few weeks were some of the happiest weeks I'd had in a long time. We'd get dinner, we'd see movies. We showed off our photography to each other. It felt like we were really building something together. However, this was around the time I started noticing weird occurrences around my apartment. Nothing too suspicious, just things that were odd. For example, my TV would be on when I got home. My sheets would be messy, even though I make my bed every morning before work. The weirdest thing of all, though, was my underwear drawer. It was like it was being rummaged through. Sometimes I'd find a fresh pair balled up on the bathroom floor. It made me scratch my head, but I never assumed anything drastic. If anything, I thought it was just me losing my mind. That is, until he finally invited me to his house. The place was lovely, clean, smelled good. It was actually furnished too, which was always a good sign. Plus, this guy knew how to set the scene.
Roses, candles, homemade spaghetti with 2 glasses of red wine. I felt my heart melt. We hadn't had sex yet, but after this, I was having a hard time convincing myself that we hadn't waited long enough. I actually wanted to give it to him. He just made me feel so desired. After a dinner full of flirts, giggles, and conversation, we began moving to the bedroom, lip-locking like a couple of crazy kids all the while.
Once we fell through the door, he told me to give him a minute to use the bathroom, which was a bit anticlimactic, but I wanted him to be comfortable. While I waited, my eyes couldn't help but wander. He had a bookshelf full of some of my favorite titles. His bed was perfectly made. The floor was freshly vacuumed, and his walls were full of framed pictures. I started looking at them and felt my heart sink into my stomach. They were all different women, some older, some younger, all with blonde hair and hazel eyes. And he wasn't in a single one. I felt disappointment wash over me. I should have known better. I was actually in the process of putting my shirt back on when one of the pictures caught my eye. It looked so familiar. I knew I had seen it somewhere. I just couldn't put my finger on it. But it bothered me so much, it was hard to pull my eyes away. That's when it hit me. I knew exactly where I had seen this woman. She was the girl on the missing person poster that was taped up on the bar window from a few weeks ago. It felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. I felt faint. I felt dizzy. I knew I needed to leave, but the room was spinning too much. I put my hand down on his dresser to stabilize myself, and that's when I felt it. It was cold. It was hard. My thumb rubbed against the ridges. I pulled my hand away and looked down. It was a copy of the key to my apartment. Mine was pink. This one was silver. I was getting weaker. I felt my knees starting to buckle and heard the sound of a toilet flushing as I began to drift into unconsciousness. The last thing I remember was the bedroom door opening. He stepped inside, a look of concern on his face, as he hurried to pick me up and put me on his bed. Then, nothing. I woke up in an empty bed the next morning. The smell of bacon permeated my nostrils. I was fully dressed, but my head was killing me. The key was gone. The pictures were gone. I slowly made my way to the kitchen to find him standing over the stove, flipping the bacon with a metal fork. I didn't speak or make a sound, but it was like he could feel my presence. He could sense me. He turned around slowly, his eyes meeting mine before he spoke. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he sang. "I was wondering when you'd be up. Someone had too much to drink last night."